taken a blanket over the whole show. I like the tyre power.
You need some new wheels, don't you?
I do.
Oh, nice.
That'd be you, yeah.
Yeah, well,
so what's the deal?
Big American sports car.
What's the deal
Well, you
there?
can buy 3, get 1 free at Tyre Power.
I want Damo to say it.
Right.
You get you can save on selected Toyo passenger and SUV tyres at Tyre Power. Buy
Yep.
3 get 1 free at
done.
Tyre Power.
There you go.
Yeah. They'll look after you, Purple.
How
Don't
are you,
worry
Crusher,
about that.
anyway?
How did we see round 0, Damo?
Yes.
But before I get to you, how you going, Red Nuts?
Yes, fair, got him.
You've run with a false, fake news narrative on my coloured hair
Yes.
that has never been coloured once
can
in its
see
life
it
for
now
15
that it's
years, and
coloured.
I'm just enjoying the fact that you're now exposed for your
No,
colourings.
what I've done is exposed a man who worked for us called Beersy. As
Who worked for us? Not anymore.
he's got minutes left. Has just got a little sniper as part of him. But given he's a Collingwood sort of bogan, I'm not surprised that this is the way he's chosen to roll, but he has bitten off way more than he's capable of chewing.
Come on, Red Rooster,
I think
get
you
in.
might come out on top on that one, Jim, over the journey.
But don't worry, I'll be
Oh, he
coming up
does.
on top. Tell us about round 0. How did you see it?
I liked it. I get why some people had reservations about it. Obviously, 8 teams played, 10 didn't. What that means for those teams in coming weeks, we'll hear from Chris Scott in a moment. But basically, it was the capturing of a weekend of real estate the AFL didn't have. They've now done that. I can't see them giving that back. And I just think now it's a matter of tinkering with it, making it better next year. I mean, we all discussed it over the weekend. It seems strange, though, to have Thursday, Friday, Saturday games and no Sunday, particularly with the long weekend in Melbourne. But again, little issues. I, as a Melburnian, didn't have an issue with the fact there were no Melbourne games.
I did.
Okay, what
You
about
did, yeah.
the
I did. I
Western
wanted a
states?
game here.
What about WA and South Australia? Because I know they're headless over there. They always tend to look, inward. But they're like, well, what about the established footy states? We just start with nothing.
I get all that, and maybe the simplest way to do it is just to have a full round of footy, Jim.
Just make the
bring it
season
forward.
1 week
yeah,
longer.
and spread the buys over the 2 weekends over the course of the season.
Call it
So-
round 0 still?
No, you'd have to call it round 1 if you've got them all to play. But Chris Scott had some issues. I mean, we all know him, and we know that he's not afraid to express a view. And sometimes he knows he ruffles feathers. And he knows in saying this, as he did last night on Fox Footy, that it was going to get a reaction, and we'll get to that reaction in a minute. But this is what he said about what it did by way of an impact on the competition.
I think the bigger compromise is that those teams get 2 buys compared to every other team. And if you ask the players, and this has gone on for a long time, the Players Association pushed the AFL to bring back the 2 buys, and the answer was always there was no time. But now they've found the time. That's the frustrating part. And like compromise sometimes it gets a bad rap. Like sometimes you need to compromise for the greater good. So, and that could be the case in this situation. My point is just don't pretend it's not a compromise. Of course it is.
I like listening to Chris. Makes his point, softens
does.
it, and then finishes with a strong point.
Yep.
Now, John Longmire, as we know, has got a different viewpoint, Jim, because he has a team in Sydney, and he knows that that is an outpost bill from an AFL sense, and then he heard what Chris Scott had to say, and he's got a take on it too.
I think Chris has got a great perspective on footy. I think he's able to sit back a bit, and even in those comments, he's also understanding that some things you need to happen for the good of the game. The grand final is played at the MCG on opposition home grounds every year. If you talk about equalisation, I think it's having a couple of games up here is probably balances it out okay, and I think from Chris's perspective, he certainly understands that.
It's a bit like Craig McRae last week responding to Lee Matthews. I love Lee Matthews, but
But hey, what did Scotty say something about the teams having a head start, especially this week that have already played?
well, that's going to be an issue, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, so the Giants play North Melbourne.
Yeah.
They've had a really good knockout or a hit out already.
Yep.
North are virtually playing their first game. Well, they are. Same with the Gold Coast Suns Adelaide.
That's going to be an interesting one because of the match-hardened nature of, you'd think, Gold
Gold
Coast
Coast
coming out of it.
Suns.
You've got also 2 teams that played last weekend playing against each other
Yes,
this week, and it's a massive game, isn't it? Well, Carlton and Richmond on Thursday, and that's going to be intriguing because...
And Collingwood, Sydney.
And Collingwood, Sydney, yeah.
But you can imagine, to Chris Scott's point, you can imagine all of the coaches and the footy departments for the 4 clubs that played that hosted games on the weekend. In other words, Brisbane, Gold Coast, GWS, and Sydney. They're all going to be piling into their president and CEO saying, for Christ's sake, make sure this happens every year.
Yeah.
Because this is the greatest free hit of all time.
Yeah.
We get a home game to start our season against a club from Melbourne, we are much more likely to win a home game than we are if we travel down there and play our first
Full
round game.
house.
Yep.
So you keep pushing the agenda of growing the game in Melbourne.
And we'll have 'em.
we, the footy department, only care about the fact
Yep.
that from now on our season starts with a home
Yeah.
game. I mean, you can't blame them, but
No, you
that's
can't.
what they're doing. And so for Chris, he's turning around saying, you're just giving these mobs a free hit.
Yeah.
Every year you're making us travel there.
Now, that's true, but then others will say, well, you've got your own boutique stadium and you play
Of
8
course.
home games. And I take the view, Jim, that you've got 23 matches in this current 2024 season, spread over 25 weeks. You'll sort it out by the end of the
No
23.
doubt you will, but,
and it'll even itself
all I'm
out.
saying is that's where Horse is coming from. He's
Yeah.
coming from, yes, it's a grow the game agenda, but for God's sake, keep it because we get a home game to start our season every year.
We like the
How
blood play,
long
don't
are we going to go with this season, by the way? In the last, 3 years? We've had 2 weeks
Two
added
weekends,
to
yeah.
a season that was already too long.
Yeah,
Are we going to end up with 30 weeks?
Well, it seems to be that way. I've still got the view, and I think you share it, don't you, that less is better. From an NFL
100%.
perspective, now they've increased their matches, NFL, from 16 to 17, and I see there's a current push to make it even 18.
Yep.
But even then, it's a compacted home and away, in inverted commas, season.
What
for
do the players want less, don't they? If you ask
well,
the players.
you say that, but then they never push back on it, and they also get more money. The game in Gather Round last year
Yeah.
created extra money for them.
And so round zero. And
No, round zero won't because it's just still inside the confines of the overall season. It's not an extra game. It's just an extra weekend of
Yeah.
competition, but it's not an extra game. But they got extra money to play. They do talk about it, Bill, but ultimately the Players Association signed off on it and regularly signs off on initiatives the AFL puts through them.
Well, I actually loved the fact that we saw full houses pretty much
Yes.
across the board.
Yeah.
And if you're getting a full house in games in Sydney and Brisbane or in New South Wales and Queensland, that's got to be a good result.
Yeah. And the only
Especially
one
at
that
the
wasn't
Giants.
jammed.
Especially at the Giants.
Yeah, the
They've
Giants-
all come
yeah,
along
yeah.
and they've seen how well the Giants, they've improved how good they were. They're going to come back, surely. You'd think. their
You'd think so,
supporters-
wouldn't you? On the
You'd hope so.
Yeah, on the livestock venue.
Yeah, the
On
poor old
Mason
Coxie.
And look,
Oh,
the one game that
purple.
didn't have
Can we cover Mason Cox?
Do we need to cover it?
No.
I never
That's
felt we
the
needed to.
greatest lot
Yeah.
of crap. Are we not allowed to have fun anymore?
No, I couldn't
in
agree
the-
more,
in
Jim.
the
I
game?
said this all weekend once you realise what happened. And then thankfully he's been able to produce some information and evidence and down-the-ground footage that suggests that there is nothing to talk about here. And I think people lost their minds.
He had a smile on his face.
Yeah.
It was just he happened to be in a position
Yep.
where he could go and do something that was fun.
Yep.
If you ask Big Mummy, the only
Yep.
thing he would like to have been facing in the other direction.
Yeah, I think he would have said
where I reckon Mace maybe not
Yeah.
have taken it on.
But it goes to show, I think, what we do in the AFL. We need to. I mean, the AFL sent the Please Explain, and I think they're to blame for some of it that's going on. But remember, Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce
Yes.
picked up the equipment of the kicker for the Baltimore Ravens, Justin Tucker, in the playoffs. Just picked it up, turfed it through it, abused him at the time, snubbed him. And then spoke about it after match, called him a dick.
Yep.
and they just move on, and there was no reason for the NFL to get involved.
What did he call him?
I don't need to read it, Bill. I just said it then.
What did you
listen
say?
to Bill.
Yeah.
What did he call him? Just so he
D
can do it again.
dot.
A dick.
Yeah.
That's cock to me. Oh, no, Damien.
All right. On that
Come
note,
on,
we'll make
Damien.
it to a break. Purple, more with you next.
Jim, I was at a Channel 9 launch today. A lot of people, a lot of who's who was there in attendance, AFL heavies, media heavies, 9 network heavies, and looked around the room at one stage and saw Fat in the back of the room. And I wondered the same thing.
Bill,
I couldn't work out
Doesn't
why he
work
was there
for
because he
Nine
walked away
and
from
doesn't
us.
work for 3AW. So
Yeah.
why were you there?
And then I learnt that Eddie Maguire was hosting and had a lot of people up on stage. And then toward the end of it, he said, "We've got a big announcement." And Bill Bellness, could you please come to the stage to make this announcement? And Bill gets up there. And he goes, "In Gather Round, we've got this massive announcement. We're going to bring in people. It's the big promotion of the year. And Bill, take our audience through what you're about to do." Bill goes, "I don't know what I'm doing."
I haven't been briefed. I hadn't been briefed as yet.
So the whole room just went flat,
Jim.
and the build up to the
Ed
crescendo
can
of the
build
announcement.
something up magnificently to a crescendo.
Which he can do.
And then, so when that point came, and it's Bill to deliver the big news.
Just like grand final day.
Yeah.
No, Jim.
To your credit, you
One.
said, Bill, Eddie, I don't know. Maybe you could tell the
And
crowd
then
what I'm doing.
did he take it and run with it? Wow.
What are you doing?
I'm going
Something on
to
a bus,
Adelaide on a bus.
Oh, really?
On
We're
a
talking
bus.
gather round. I'm going to Adelaide. Yeah.
No, on a bus with 10 people.
No.
And we go over there. It'll be a nice bus trip. And then we get there that night. We're having a function over there, Jim. and one lucky couple will win a brand new car.
Yeah.
And they have the car for the whole week, and they get accommodation and come along.
And they get to spend the day with you.
Yeah, a day. And
This is on a Tuesday, by the way,
Happy
so
hour.
he's going to miss the
There's
show.
Nothing you won't do for money.
No, there's
you,
not.
you are the greatest money working lady I've ever.
now-
And that includes.
Just trying to
There's a few in the bloody frame to win this race, by the way. But I reckon you're the number one. You'll do anything.
Just trying to. Think.
That's true, Bill, because someone on the way out today suggested you might have actually had a reason to arrive there today too.
No,
Oh,
no,
my
that's not
God.
true. No, don't
It's
say
actually
that.
frightening.
No, one.
Do you still do those stupid messages for $60?
cameos?
Yeah, cameos, he does, yeah.
They add up.
$60.
They add up.
They add up.
And the smile on the kiddies' faces when they see it. I've never seen anything like it.
G'day, Warren. It's Bill. I hear it's
Insert
your 60th.
name here.
Yeah. Good on you, Bill. Go Cats. That'll be $70. It's actually frightening.
Parrish has got a hammy too. He won't
All
play
right,
for Essendon
so what
this week.
are we doing with selection purple coming
Well,
into this
there's hope for
first round?
Richmond that they will get back all of, or at least some, or one of Dusty Martin.
So what does that mean?
Well, we don't know until team selection,
Well-
Bill. No, well, Tom Lynch, as we know, hasn't played since round 4 last
Need
year.
him.
Yeah, and there's Jaden Shorts on public record today at a media conference hoping that all three come back in.
Dusty?
Nankervis, Dusty,
Nankers.
Nankervis and Lynch. He's hopeful all three
Yankees.
come back.
Yeah.
But until we see the teams, we don't know. The Bulldogs will announce some fresh faces too. Obviously,
Four. You said
well,
four.
Well, Rolly Sanders just has
Has
to
to
play.
play,
I mean,
surely.
I've heard Luke Beveridge talk of him in ways I've never heard coaches talk about first-year players. I mean, he's so exciting, isn't he? And he has said that he's the best, in his eyes anyway, equipped first-year player that he's ever
That
seen.
he
That's
has
before,
ever seen.
Yeah, that's before playing a game of footy. But we saw a hint of it in the 2 scratch matches they played. He just looks as though he's been doing it for 10 years.
So
So
player of the carnival last year, so he comes
He was
in with
he? Yeah.
great credentials. Yeah, whatever that award's called.
Who are the other three?
James Harms will make
Chompers.
his Bulldogs
Good.
debut,
Good luck.
having come from Melbourne. Nick Caulfield, good story, Nick, because he was banged up at St Kilda, and they just made the view, and he did too, that sometimes you just need a fresh start.
Yes.
And I'm really glad because he was a top 10 draft pick in his particular year in question, and also expectation that Lockie Bramble from Hawthorn will play as part of that. Joel Selwood's stand gets opened on the weekend, Bill.
I tell you what, it is magnificent. You'll love it when you see it. But there's a
Run
lot
out
of
of chairs.
There's a lot of standing room. There's
Well, that's because you ran out of
4,000
chairs.
standing room spots.
I think
That's
Jim's
a
onto
lot.
something. I've seen this with my own eyes.
What have you-
the standing
where-
room.
how many
Look,
eyes?
It looks good. 4. It looks good, but I think Jim's got a point.
No,
The
no.
fact that the
See,
steel
I
was,
know where
was-
you're trying to
was
go.
dodgy last year, and they just didn't have enough to complete it.
What would we asked me and Steve Hocking,
Oh.
we asked the sponsors and supporters what they want. You know what they come back? We want standing room.
What do we want?
We want standing room.
When
do
do we
we
want it?
now? And it took another 6 months, but we got it. So a lot of standing room. You'll love it. You know what it means,
Will
Jim?
you watch the game from there? Or in the cotton on box?
I'll be on the cotton on box.
You'll be in the teeth of that magnificent wind too, come July with that standing room.
But
the
you know
beer
what?
will freeze in your hand.
It's gone from about 24,000 to 40,000 capacity now.
Right.
You know what that means? A lot more supporters from the opposition will be able to get in
really?
there
Because
now.
it used to be about 60
About 70.
in the
Yes,
forward
that's
pocket.
it.
70.
So you'll get a lot more opposition supporters there, which could be
Will you
interesting.
fill it every week?
Well, that is an interesting question. We'll see.
Will
We'll
we?
revisit this in about.
Hey, feel for the boys that have blown their knee up round 1.
You do, Jim, don't you?
Jeez,
We
that's hard
touched
work.
on a bit of this over the course of the weekend, but you're referring obviously to Sam Doherty, who now undergoes a third knee reconstruction on top of the 2 that we know of serious bouts of cancer that he's overcome. So the resilience already attached to that person knows no bounds, and he's going to go down that path again and seek to come back after a third one. But it's just sad, isn't it? When you know what
and
he's
a
gone
ripper
through.
bloke too. We all love.
Yeah.
Doc. He's just
And the
one of
effect
those-
it had on the team, it's just very hard for Carlton people to deal with, as it is for Brisbane Lions people with Kitty Coleman,
Yeah.
who went down just before half time of that same game. They were both injured in the first half, and he now won't be seen again. The guy, as we know, who got votes officially in the Norm Smith Medal count last year
Well,
was in front.
I thought you could see in Fages' press conference how devastated he was. Not only do you hate seeing that as a coach because of the individual's own demeanour and next year, but also how important he is to what they do.
Yeah.
They don't have another version of him.
No, and I spoke to Chris Fagan about the Lions, and he raised his name regularly in this chat I had, and I raise that now because he's got a real soft spot for him, Jimmy. He referred to the fact that he's the first person in his family to buy a house and how proud that was. He's got a young family and just how he'd grown as a person. And this is what he was talking about only 2 weeks ago. And then first game back, as you said on the weekend, first game back and now out for the year. And then
how do you replace him, by the way,
No,
as
you
what you're getting at?
Because
the halfback,
Rich Flavour's gone.
Yeah, Rich Flavour's gone. Beautiful left foot. So maybe Zorko might have to go back and run. Because they need that run.
To your point, Billy, he was one they were identifying as going to be the bridging of the 4-point loss in a grand final to rectifying that as a key part of it. So Callan Ward, this happens to him regularly, doesn't it? He just gets banged up and was caught in a tackle against Bo McCreary. The AFL cleared that particular moment. I didn't have an issue with him clearing it, by the way. I felt it was just an accident that happened. But unfortunately for him, it's going to be a minimum 4 and quite possibly 8 and maybe even more for him. What are we looking forward to most on the weekend? For me, it's Collingwood-Sydney on the Friday. I mean, there's a heap of matches that appeal and jump off the page, and the one prior to that, the Richmond-Carlton one, I think is equally intriguing. But I really want to see what Sydney can do against the Collingwood.
I agree with that, but we have seen those 4 teams. Actually, funnily enough, the game we're doing, Hawthorn-Essendon.
Yes.
Big game.
I mean, I don't know where either of those 2 teams are at, to be honest.
Essendon very short in that game.
Yeah.
Very, very short. The other one is Melbourne and Dogs. That's an interesting game because it's only round 1 and Melbourne need a win.
Yeah, that's right.
Bill's on fire.
Go with that, Bill.
That's not bad.
No, it's pretty good.
Because you don't know what the Dogs are going to bring, do you? Very good side on paper. You just don't know what they're going to bring. There's some really, really good games. The other one is I've jumped on the bandwagon of the Gold Coast Suns. I'm on it, especially early in the year up there.
Yeah.
They take on Adelaide, which will be a good game, but jump on the wagon. Me and the grass-eating Matt Rao.
Is that game at Metricon as well? Or whatever?
Yes.
No, yeah, it's a
So they're
got
starting
a
2 weeks in a row
bang,
at
bang
home.
People's Choice
Oh,
Stadium.
my goodness.
People's Choice.
You can find out a lot with the draw, Bill.
Yeah.
You can find out who the AFL want to succeed
And who the AFL owns.
and who they also are not so keen to do well. It's
that's
an
right.
interesting tool.
And Freo, what are
at
they
their
going to do?
disposal. Don't know.
As Patrick Smith described it many, many, many years ago when he wrote that famous column in The Australian, the draw / the fixture was the AFL's weapon of mass destruction.
And it can destruct. Nice to see you, Purple.
Likewise.
Well
Nice
done.
beard.
And Damo will be on the midweek rub tomorrow as well with Joey and Daisy. This is Triple M's Rush Hour. James Brayshaw, Billy Brownless.